Village of Dry River. Population 268.
Breach!
Jameson propped himself up in bed at the shout. For a moment, he was trying to decide if the shout he'd heard was part of a dream or had woken him from the dream.
Breach!
He threw off his quilted blanket and nearly leapt out of bed. He didn't bother to look out the window to see what was happening. The warning shouts had been enough. His feet slid into his shoes with practiced ease, and in the next heartbeat, he was through the bedroom door.
Breach!
His older brother, Thomas, was ahead of him as the two young men hammered down the stairs. They exploded out through the front door 4 seconds later. They leapt over the porch stairs and onto the thin, grassy turf, and from there they split up. Thomas's job would be to head directly to the breach, to back up the armored defenders. Jameson was 16. He wouldn't be asked or expected to back up the fighters for another year or two. Besides, his skill set was much better used for getting more defenders ready to fight. He ran away from the shouting, toward the home of one of the village's best defenders. It was Terrence that was shouting. It made Jameson feel a little better, knowing that the captain of his village's defenders was sounding the alarm instead of responding to it. It would help him focus on his job. As he ran, he passed by several other villagers, all coming out of their houses, all with their own tasks. Some carried baskets of water bottles to the breach. Some headed to the dining hall to make sure the upper level was ready in case the breach couldn't be contained. He passed the blacksmith shop, where he spent most of his days, and his destination was just ahead. The front door of Trojan's rough log house was standing open. Jameson leapt up the stairs and was inside a moment later. The main room of the house was lit by 4 pillar candles, each on a stand that held it at waist height. A series of cluttered bookshelves lined one wall. An ancient, tattered, overstuffed chair and a small, rough wooden table had been pushed against the walls, out of the way. Trojan was in the middle of the room, his cuirass on but not buckled. He was valiantly trying to get the buckles secured with his good right arm. He'd gone to bed in his padded arming clothes, as usual, but with a left arm that ended in a stump at the wrist, there was no way he'd get himself armored.
I've got it,
Jameson said, crossing the room in 3 strides. He got to work on the buckles, securing the chest and back plates to each other.
Thank you, Jameson,
the old warrior rumbled. The two were the same height, but Trojan was broad at the shoulders, like a boulder that occasionally took up armor and axe to defend his village. As he cinched the straps tight, Jameson heard more footsteps coming up the stair behind him.
And Randall makes 2,
Trojan said. Jameson finished with the cuirass and looked up, just in time to be handed an arm harness. He took it, meeting the eyes of the other boy who had come to help Trojan get armored. Then he set the plates over the padded shoulder, feeding the tie-down cords through grommeted openings in the pauldron. Across from him, Randall did the same.
Where's Daniel and Aster?
Jameson asked, looking over his shoulder toward the door without slowing his work on the vambrace buckles.
They should be here by now.
Don't know,
Trojan replied.
Let's just do what we can.
Jameson was working ahead of Randall, getting his buckles and tie cords secured faster and smoother. He smiled, watching the younger boy work for a moment. Randall caught his glance and returned the smirk. Trojan caught their exchange too.
Take it easy, boys. You're racing the turn, not each other. Get it done right.
Jameson tightened the last buckle on the left vambrace, securing the modified left hand onto Trojan's arm, a heavy iron sphere. With the arm harness done, he reached toward the armor stand. He pulled one leg harness down and began fitting it around Trojan's leg.
It's done right,
Randall said, finishing the opposite arm and getting started on the leg plates. More steps thumped up the porch stairs, heavier and clanking. Jameson didn't look up from his work, but he knew it wasn't either of the other 2 village kids who were supposed to help them.
You can slow down a little, boys. It's an outer breach.
Terrence was standing in the doorway, sweating from exertion, but his helmet was under his arm, and his armor was clean.
Trojan, I want you out there in case they break the inner fence, but it's holding good. I don't think they'll get through.
By this point, Jameson was nearly done with the leg buckles and was reaching for the sabaton. Randall was catching up. Terrence twisted to look behind him. It looked uncomfortable in his armor, to scan outside for a moment. Then he returned his gaze to the boys and their work.
Daniel and Astor?
Trojan shrugged and shook his head. The captain sighed, then grumbled.
Those two are lucky it's not a full breach. I'll be doubling their chores for at least a few days as it is.
With that, he retreated through the door and stomped down the stairs and across the grass outside. The two boys stood, their work complete. Trojan rolled his shoulders, then lifted his knees one at a time, testing the armor's movement. The boys circled him, checking each other's work.
You're all set, Trojan,
Jameson said, handing the warrior his helmet. Trojan took it with a nod to each of them, and then settled it on his head. He picked up his axe from beside the door, then clanked down the steps and away toward the breach. Jameson took a deep breath, then crossed the room to the table. He picked up the oversized canteen set on top, then unscrewed the cap. Randall was wiping his brow as Jameson took a long drink. He passed the canteen across, and Randall took a long sip. Handing the canteen back, Randall said,
I hope Astor and Daniel don't get in too much trouble.
He looked out through the windows. Jameson took another drink before answering.
It's the first time Daniel's been late. Astor's the one who'll get it the worst.
He sipped again.
How many times is this?
He handed the canteen across.
4, I think.
Randall answered, getting a sip.
She's old enough to know better.
Jameson grumbled, shaking his head.
She'll learn.
She was 13, but they needed her help. Maybe not this night, this alarm, but if both fences had broken, Trojan couldn't have gotten armored fast enough. A delay of seconds could mean someone they knew getting infected. The turned were contagious right down to their fingernails.
At least it's just the outer fence this time,
Randall said.
When someone gets hurt, Terrence really comes down on people who skip.
Jameson shot the younger boy a sly grin.
You've skipped out on a few alarms.
Randall looked sheepish.
Yeah, and I paid for it every time. You're the only kid I know who never skipped.
He let out a long sigh.
I think it takes losing someone before you get it through your head. You were way ahead of most kids there.
He took another drink, then handed over the canteen.
How old were you when your mom was taken?
Jameson finished his sip and swallowed.
12.
He answered.
You moved here after it happened. It was just a scratch.
He looked away, out the window.
She held on for 3 days, so we got to say goodbye.
Randall nodded slowly.
Not everyone does. Don't know if I'd call it lucky.
There was a long silence between them. Jameson let out a deep breath, then said,
I'll get my house ready, if you can finish up here. I'll meet you at the breach. Maybe they'll let us stay up a while.
He handed the canteen back.
Yeah, I'll handle this.
Randall went to the back window, where the house's rain barrel was. He refilled the canteen, closed it, and set it back on the table. Jameson was already on his way down the front steps. He crossed the village at an easy jog. By this point, most of the village was awake, going about their alarm duties and checking to see how serious the situation was. The rough log homes and buildings had lights spilling out of their windows and open doors, as people carrying lit candles moved from one room to another. A few defenders crossed his path, heading for the shouting at the breach. They looked calm and relaxed, but still moved at a swift pace. Word had spread that only the outer fence had broken, but the defenders needed to be out, and the village had to be awake. If the inner fence failed, everyone would be in danger. The entire village would be awake all night, huddled in the upper levels of the few two-story houses or the dining hall, if they were very, very lucky. Now that Trojan was ready for action, Jameson's job was to prepare for that possibility. His family lived in one of those two-story houses, and he had to get it ready. First, he headed for the dining hall to get a basket of fresh rolls. If they were going to be upstairs until dawn, they'd need at least some food. The village's dining hall was massive. Like almost every other building, it was held off the dirt by heavy wooden posts, treated to prevent rot and driven into the ground far enough that the frost wouldn't push them out. The steep roof sloped down to the main level walls and was dotted with dormer windows for the upper level. All the windows and doors were thrown open. They wouldn't stop the turned, so it would be better to have more light in the morning to chase them out. Inside, more than a dozen people were at work. The oversized fire pit in the kitchen was hot, and the air smelled of stew and fresh bread. One of the village men brought a tray overflowing with rolls to a table where his wife was filling baskets.
That's the last batch.
He said, setting the tray down.
Oh, that's plenty.
His wife replied.
Do they have enough water out there?
I'll go check.
He said, passing Jameson as he left the hall. The woman smiled as Jameson approached. She slid a full basket of rolls across the table toward him.
Bring back what you don't eat, Jameson. It sounds like that inner fence is holding fine.
He nodded.
Have you seen Daniel or Astor?
He asked.
They skipped.
I saw Daniel earlier. He was looking for Astor.
She looked past him, out the main door. Jameson followed her gaze, then picked up the offered basket and headed for the door. As he was leaving, a pair of women on the upper floor pulled on ropes wound through pulleys to control the stairs. They lifted them all the way up, testing their range of motion, then lowered them again. If something would prevent them from rising out of reach of the turned, now was the time to find out. Several others were laying out bedrolls. Once he reached his own house, Jameson did much the same work. After setting the basket of rolls on the bedside table in his father's room, he filled half a dozen canteens from the rain barrel attached to the back of the house. He tested his own stair ropes and pulleys, raising and lowering the assembly to make sure it worked smoothly. With this done, he went outside. His father was not far from their door, speaking to Amelia, the Defender's trainer and Terrence's wife. She was in her armor and carried her axe and helmet. With them was one of the Defenders, Greg, wearing a flame weapons pack instead of his armor. He was describing something with his hands as much as his voice. Jameson saw his father nod, and then the others separated and moved off between other houses.
All set, Father.
Jameson said as he approached.
I'd like to help with the breach.
Talbot smiled, laying a hand on his son's shoulder.
Go ahead. Terrence wants to talk to you about the fence anyways. Don't stay out late. Lots to do tomorrow.
Yes, sir.
Jameson replied, before jogging off towards the shouting. The village of Dry River was surrounded by 2 rings of wooden posts, each fashioned from a section of a tree about a foot thick. They stuck out of the ground 8 feet, and their bottom half was treated with rot-resistant paint and buried in the ground just as far. These posts were spaced 30 feet apart and supported the steel cables that kept out the turn. They would press against the wires, hands reaching between and inward, but were unable to move any farther. Against the wooden doors of the two gates, they would batter their hands to a pulp, spattering the outside with infected blood that would make the planks rot much faster than normal. They must not have sensed the wire fence as a barrier. It just prevented them from getting any closer to the living on the other side. Most of the time, anyway. That night, the pressure from the swarm of the turned had snapped several of the wires of the outer fence. Many of them had tripped on the remaining lower wires, fallen inwards, and gotten up between the shambling feet of those behind. The spaces between the inner and outer fences were closed off by more connecting wires. A 30-foot square space had filled with walking corpses, but had soon stabilized. The turned in that space now stuck their arms and hands through the inner fences, knowing they were closer to the living, but unable to get close enough. Extra torch posts had been set in the ground, forming a half ring around that section of inner fence. Half a dozen armored defenders stood in that ring, helmets off but nearby, axes held relaxed. 3 more defenders with flame weapons backed them up. Terrence stood back, observing, speaking to Thomas as they looked at the swarm. Trojan, the only one wearing their helmet, stood far out in front of the others, axe held ready on his right shoulder, as if daring the turned to come closer. Randall stood just outside the circle of torches. As Jameson approached, the younger boy faced him, then began crossing the space to meet him. When he was 60 feet or so away, Jameson stopped in his tracks. The smell of the dead had become overwhelming.
Ugh,
he grumbled, covering his mouth and nose for a moment. Randall nodded, wrinkling his own nose.
Yeah, it's bad tonight. When you're not around them like this, you forget.
yeah.
Jameson agreed, forcing back his disgust. If the defenders had to deal with it, he could.
We can smell them from our house at night, but not like this.
The two boys headed toward the group around the breach. They circled behind the torches and armored defenders to where Terrence and Thomas were standing. Still holding his helmet under his arm, Terrence was pointing to the fences. Thomas nodded at his words. As Jameson approached, he began to make out what they were saying. As he suspected, they were talking about the broken outer fence.
And there too, second from the top.
Terrence was saying.
That one is under more tension than the others. It'll snap if they press much harder. That's what happened to the outer fence. You've got to keep after them, Thomas, and make sure they get it right.
Thomas nodded again, smiling at Jameson and Randall as the boys approached.
We've had Jame in the armory lately, so the younger kids have been doing the fence work.
Thomas said.
A lot of them can't reach the middle wires without a ladder.
With a chuckle, he clapped a hand on Jameson's shoulder.
We'll have to drag you out of there to fix the fence this time, so it'll hold.
Jameson laughed with him.
It's your armor I'm working on. If you want it to take longer, that's fine with me.
The whole group had a laugh at this.
Don't worry, they're not going to break through tonight.
Terrence said confidently.
And if they do, well, I'll see you at your house, right?
He added.
Yes, sir.
Jameson replied.
It's all ready.
He looked at his older brother, sobering.
Daniel and Astor didn't show tonight. Have you seen them?
Thomas shook his head.
Skipping out, I guess.
Terrence looked away from the others, across the circle of torches and toward the dining hall. His face took on a curious look.
Perhaps not,
he said, motioning with his head. Through the gap between two houses, Daniel was crossing the ground at a run. He was making a beeline for Terrence. His expression was full of worry. He stopped in front of them, facing the guard captain, fighting for breath as he spoke.
Sir, I'm so sorry I wasn't helping with Trojan. I've been looking for Astor,
he gasped.
Her mom said I was the last one to see her, And that was this morning, in the North Bean field.
He took a few more panting breaths.
I've been looking since just before dinner. No one knows where she is.
Terrence's mouth pressed into a thin line. Then he nodded.
Don't worry too much, Daniel. The others got Trojan ready,
He looked toward the fence and the swarm.
and the turn haven't broken through the inner fence. No one is hurt.
He looked back toward the dining hall.
Where's Astor's mother?
Helping at the kitchen, but she'll be coming here soon.
Daniel said, his breath finally coming under control.
I don't know where else to look, sir. I just...
Calm down.
Terrence interrupted him.
Go get Madeline. Bring her here.
Daniel nodded, still very worried, then jogged back toward where he'd appeared. He passed out of sight a moment later. During all this, Jameson had moved away from the group, down the fence line from the ring of torches. Something had caught his eye. He was now well away from the turn at the inner fence and could safely approach the wires. The swarm pressed against the outer fence, sensing his approach. Their arms reached toward him, their heads and gaping mouths pointed directly at him. The turned were pressed shoulder to shoulder, chest to back. They were varied in size and shape, and just as varied in their state of decay. Some looked like they had been dead for decades, while others looked like they were, for lack of any better word, fresh. Jameson forced back the rising bile as he focused on one in particular. She was shorter than the others, maybe about 14 years old. Her blonde hair was ragged and matted with blood. Large, deep bites had torn flesh away from her shoulders, arms, and legs. Her eyes rolled upwards. Her mouth was hanging open, slackly.
Oh no.
Jameson breathed. He shook his head slowly, then looked back to shout at the others.
Terrence!
It was Astor out there, on the wrong side of the fence. Jameson's heart filled with dread, guilt, and sorrow all at once. He heard the heavy boots and clanking armor coming up behind him. He didn't speak. He only pointed. He didn't have to. Terrence had seen her as he approached.
Damn!
The guard captain breathed. A moment later, they heard a shocked, shrill cry from behind them.
No! Astor!
Madeline had fallen to the ground, spilling the basket of rolls she'd been bringing for the defenders. She lay in a heap, covering her face with their hands and weeping. Another of the women from the dining hall knelt beside her, and, within a moment, two of the other defenders had joined them, sharing in her grief. Terrence clanked over to her, passing Thomas and Randall as they approached Jameson at the fence. They were all silent for a long moment, grieving, looking out through the fence at their friend. Another set of heavy, clanking footsteps approached them. Trojan appeared between Jameson and Thomas. He put his hand on Thomas's shoulder, and the iron ball at the end of his left arm came to rest on Jameson's shoulder.
I was so mad at her earlier.
Jameson said quietly.
Now I feel like I've let her down.
He rested his own hand on the iron ball. Trojan nodded.
Seeing her tonight is bad enough.
He took a long breath.
It'd be twice as bad to see her tomorrow.
And worse,
to see her at a breach.
The boys chorused.
I'll go out at dawn and put her to rest.
Trojan said. He looked at Jameson.
You should go with me, James.
Jameson nodded. It was the only funeral their friend would get. It was the least he could do. Village of Dry River. Population 267.